Gerald Celente, top trends forecaster in the country, has made hundreds of spot-on predictions. More than 2 years ago, charted exactly what was going to happen with the economy, the bank implosions, the consolidation of power, the looting, the unfolding police state, and the building revolution. The establishment knows they've got a revolution on their hands. That's why they're saying they're going to deploy 379,000 Homeland Security troops from the Army and Marine Corps and Air Force in the United States in the next 2 years. They're suddenly popping up everywhere, conditioning the public. They're openly announcing Bank of the World, global carbon taxes. States and cities and counties and the feds are passing all these new taxes. Obama has been breaking every promise. All of this is coming to a head. You predicted the Tea Parties. You called them taxpayer brushfire rebellions were some of the terms you used. You said 2 years ago, when I was reading when we first started getting you on, that those would be ignored and that by 2012 everything would melt down. Expand now. We're now 2 years later. Your forecast, unfortunately, is about 99% accurate, even better than my 95% accuracy, and I really do chart my accuracy. Let us into your brain, Gerald Celente. What's happening next?
Here's what we're concerned about next. As you know, we just published the Autumn Trends Journal, and now we're working on the top trends for 2010. What we're most concerned about, Alex, is what we're calling Terror 2010. We're forecasting that there is a very high probability of a major terror strike against the United States. And among the reasons why it's going to happen is what's going on right now in Pakistan. And most people, of course, aren't aware of the United States policy of increasing that war to a much greater extent now than it's ever been on the Afghan-Pakistan border.
Gerald, let me interrupt. You also predicted 9/11, so people better pay attention to what you're saying.
Actually, they could Google my name, Celente, USA Today, December 14th, 2000, and the headline read, 2001 won't be our year, Trendseer says. We said that Americans wouldn't be safe at home or abroad in 2001. And right now what's going on now is that Pakistan has launched a major offensive in South Waziristan. A couple of months ago, they were in the Swat Valley. And every time that the Pakistani army, and Pakistan has to be one of the most corrupt nations on earth, and they're being funded, of course, by the United States. The president, Zardari, he was called Mr. 10%. He was the husband of Bhutto, who was assassinated. They call him Mr. 10% because he took 10% of all the action that went on in the government. He's now the president. And what's going on is that the anti-Americanism sweeping through Pakistan, I mentioned the Swat Valley, it was the biggest amount of people displaced since Rwanda. Just a month ago, with 3 million refugees, and now the same thing is happening once again in South Waziristan. So the anti-Americanism sweeping through the Middle East is at an all-time high, and now it's also, of course, going on in Iran. Again, current events form future trends. We just saw last Sunday that several Iranian and National Guard, the Republican Guard, were killed in a suicide attempt that Iran is blaming on the United States and Israel. So we're concerned that there's going to be a terror strike against the United States, false flag or real. We're saying something is going to happen very major in this field in 2010. So now we take it again as trend forecasters. What does that mean? Good excuses to close the bank. We're getting emails from all over the world, Alex, and from top people that are seeing very clearly that the United States strategy is to devalue the dollar so that they pay back this massive loan with cheap money. It's like you loaning me $100, and then all of a sudden that $100 only be worth being worth 10 cents, and I pay you back 10 cents. When you loaned it to me, it was worth $100.
And Gerald, I want to stop you again, and that's key what you just mentioned. On the record, the Bank of England, the private Federal Reserve, they're both partners, as you know, but for listeners that may not, they are the ones openly killing the dollar, bad-mouthing it, making all the decisions to kill it. It's their G20 meeting and saying we need to phase it out, devalue it, go to SDRs as an above-country currency, bank to bank, and then they'll control all the different currencies of the world so they can engage in more insider trading, more consolidation of wealth criminally with their insider knowledge and control, their regulatory control. The Madoff-type, Kinlay-type criminals running the global regulatory system that has now already been built but now being unveiled, they are killing it. Meanwhile, our media tells us the Arabs are killing it when the Russians, the Chinese, the Arabs are saying, we all hold trillions of your dollars. Why are you ripping us off? Why are you devaluing this when you asked us to buy it? And the United States admits, the last White House and the new one admits they're running Jundilla that's blowing up military bases and police stations to get the Iranians to attack back. They admit they're escalating the war in Pakistan and Afghanistan to elicit real resistance, which they're then going to call terrorism, used to launch a wider war and domestically crack down on the population. So for people to see an accurate map and tell me if you agree, don't see the world as nations. We now have these global corporations that control the UN and the central banks, and they are playing nations and groups off against each other to consolidate the power.
Well said. I agree with everything that you said. And that's precisely what's going on. And what the American people have to understand is that as the dollar devalues, and of course this trend has been going on for a long time, as I mentioned when they talk about Dow 10,000, well, when you went back to 1999, since that time, well, you could buy a euro, for example, for 95 cents. Now it's going to cost you $1.50. And back then you could buy an ounce of gold for $280.
So you're saying the stock market's really down, we're just buying it with devalued dollars so it looks like it's more.
Exactly. An ounce of gold now, of course, costs what? $1,060.
Yes.
So what the people are doing is they're lowering the standard of living for everyone. The gap between the 1% owning more of assets has never been higher in the 20th century than it is now. So they're pushing everybody down into poverty as the money is going up to the top to the very few. And about the jobless recovery that we talk about, 72% of our GDP is consumer-based. Again, we saw the numbers coming out today. The unemployment rate continues to rise, the amount of new people looking for unemployment. A jobless recovery is like being almost pregnant. You can't, it doesn't happen. There's no such thing. And when you go back to the last depression, you read the history of it, they were doing the same kind of jive talk back then. They would rush the market up, they sucker the people into it, the market would collapse, and they would talk about the recovery being just around the corner.
And that yo-yo went on for 3 years until they admitted we were really in a big depression. How long will the yo-yoing go in your opinion?
Well, it will continue for probably. We think the real numbers are going to come out in December when this Christmas retail sales are a bust. So when by the second quarter around March, when reality hits, February, March, as it did this year, when the markets collapsed, they can't hide it anymore. But what happens is, what we're concerned about, again, it's either false flag or real. They're going to divert the people's attention, and we're saying Terror 2010. So they keep playing the yo-yo by throwing new games into the mix. So they'll have the people's attention diverted. Look what happened. People forget, Alex, that before 9/11, how unpopular George Bush was. And then they got this guy that couldn't fight his way out of a paper bag who's going to tell everybody he's going to hunt down Osama bin Laden, dead or alive. The whole nation followed him after 9/11. The same kind of scenario could happen now.
Well, that's what the Rand Corporation's saying, that they need a big war to get their new world order. Gerald, I want to shift back to an earlier subject. How do you see the rebellion against this manifesting? You called it taxpayer rebellions, demonstrations, rallies 2 years ago, getting bigger and bigger. You predicted the term jobless recovery a year and a half ago. I mean, I want to ask you, Gerald, how did you specifically even pick the bogus term? I mean, how did you know they were going to come up with that? Or did you see?